Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Ozcast.
Hello, Nest listeners. Great to have you back after another win. We are building slowly but surely, and we can cross yet again all the way to Tokyo for the Nest episode this week. Drew Jones, konnichiwa to you, my Olympic friend.
Ohio, Gabi. Great to be with you from Hotel Kazusaya in Tokyo. Beautiful morning here. The typhoon has moved in, so it's raining. It's a little bit cold. It's a bit of humidity in the air, but getting set for another big day.
Mate, just talk us through what it's like over there. We're watching on, we're enthralled, we're loving it. It's such an enjoyable games to witness. How is it at the coalface?
Awesome yesterday. That it was that line that you dance on sometimes where, you don't want to be too much of a flag waver, but enjoying what was a historic moment with Arnie Titmus beating Katie Ledecky, and I think it was the gold medal that Australia kind of needed with half the country in lockdown to give us something to really celebrate. And I guess it's like you do some of the research on these athletes and you build it up to have it then deliver in the moment was really great. So one of your former colleagues and my current colleague, Jeff Smith, was actually got to be inside watching Titmus win the gold. Which was awesome. So we sort of celebrated that yesterday, getting to watch the Boomers live on Sunday night and watch Team USA for a little bit was a bit of a pinch me moment. So, yeah, it's been awesome so far.
Brilliant stuff, mate. Enjoy it. Mate, the Olympics are all about flag waving. I mean, don't feel guilty about that at all. Everyone's there doing the Dean Boxels when Australia gets up and wins the gold. It's what it's all about. So enjoy every moment. You are very lucky, but well-deserved as well. So carry on living it up. Any cultural insights there that you're enjoying before we get on to the Eagles game?
Well, I guess the great shame of the Olympics is that we are very restricted in what we do. They really clamped down as the fifth wave took hold of Tokyo. So we're only allowed outside of the hotel for 15 minutes per day unless we're at work. And if we're caught going to venues other than essentially the mini mart close to our hotel, then we can have our accreditation ripped up. So, I think a few people might be dancing on the line a little bit. I've heard of some people going out to the park and knocking back a few beers, but that's not something we're willing to risk. So I haven't been able to indulge too much other than sipping a couple of Asahis in the room. So looking forward to being out of the bubble after 2 weeks, and then we can go out and get ramen and really start to live up in the Japanese culture to an extent whilst they're still in a state of emergency.
Brilliant, mate. Well, hopefully there's more Australian medals for you to celebrate and more big team wins like the Olyroos against Argentina, which I enjoyed enormously. Hopefully they can knock off Egypt tomorrow and the Matildas can win as well. But we digress. Let's get back onto the West Coast Eagles because they had a victory against the Saints, which was really enjoyable. Nervy at the end as the Saints came hard, but that was to be expected. I mean, anyone who thought this would be a cruise at Optus, I think, was a little bit naive. They're playing well, as we highlighted last week, and they gave us a big test late. And when you've got a big forward like Max King in supreme form like he was, well, the opposition is always likely to be in the game right until the end. But thankfully, we closed it out. We'll give our gold, silver and bronze and then a couple of other medals as well in our Nest medal votes from 5-1. They're coming up shortly. Also want to talk about Adam Simpson's comments, which were hugely controversial at the end of last week. That's an interesting discussion point we'll get to. Shannon Hurn plays his 300th this week. We'll look ahead to the Pies game and the changes as well for Collingwood on Saturday at the MCG. But the Saints win, Drewy, from what you were able to watch over there in Tokyo. What did you make of it?
Yeah, great to get a win on the board. And as we discussed last week, it was always going to be a test. And Simo spoke about it in his press conference after the game, that their scout on St Kilda over the previous 4 to 6 weeks had them as one of the form sides of the competition. So impressive that we were able to break free of that arm wrestle and put a bit of a lead on them, and then probably what we were able to do, Garby, in that game that we haven't done as much this season is that we were able to just put the brakes on them. Apart from Max King getting a hold of us for a while in the last quarter there, mostly we were able to stem momentum. And then, we get Dom Sheed to sort of stand up and put the full stop on it for us when we needed it. But, Tim Kelly, Elliot Yeo, Nick Nat-Nui, they all had their time dominating during periods of the match, particularly Kelly in the second quarter. I actually watched the full second quarter so I could try and get my head around how well Kelly was playing during that surge. And him and Nick Nat, the chemistry was awesome. So I was at the swimming while the match was on. So dipping in and out. So what we worked out is that if you stay off the Wi-Fi and have your work phone on roaming, you can use the Australian apps. So I was able to go onto Foxtel Go and watch a sort of, it wasn't at full speed. There were a couple of flickers here and there, but I could dip in and out of the West Coast game. So, I was celebrating hard, and my cameraman, who is looking after three of us while we're here, he goes for North Melbourne. So he was cheering really hard because Carlton were collapsing in that game against North earlier. So we had a good day at the swimming, not only because, we're covering the Olympics, but both of our teams had a win.
Fantastic. Yeah, the duet was back. TK and Nick Nat in the middle.
Yep.
I mean, it's us at our very best, I think, when those two are in sync. And in that second quarter, they just lifted. I mean, Tim was sensational. He put the team on his back, as Elliot Yeo said after the game, and drove us forward, and then Dom Sheed delivered late on. So as a few people mentioned, it was nice to have midfielders up there in the votes, which you'll see in a moment. Those three were brilliant and delivered when we needed them. The defence held up pretty well too. Max King, got the better of them late on, but in the first half, I think they had a really good game. Josh Rotham's an interesting discussion point out of this game. I thought he was really good, in particular in the first half. Then he makes a couple of mistakes in the second half. And he's been an interesting talking point out of this game, Joshy Rotham, because I don't think he's a whipping boy, but I feel as though people want to magnify his mistakes over the positives that he brings to the team. And I thought aerially he had a really good game. And then, the bounce mistake that cost us a goal. Look, hopefully he learns from that in the future, simply not to bounce in front of your own goal square. But that can happen to anyone. It was a bit of a freak accident. Then late on, he chooses to mark instead of punch with Max King bearing down on him. But if you watch the replay, he could go to punch and it won't make a difference anyway. Max King jumps over the top of him and you take a mark regardless. And all the defenders in the second half got beaten by Max King in marking contests. He was just unstoppable. I think if you watch the first half again, you'll notice that Josh Rotham had a really good game. And I found some of the criticism of him to be, a little bit misplaced. This is not a Josh Rotham fan page at all, but I don't think he deserved to be dropped when he was a few weeks ago. I just think he had a really good game, and he deserves to be in our back six at the moment, and he's adding a lot more than he's taking away.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I've enjoyed everything that Josh Rotham has brought to the table over the last couple of years, and he's making himself into a really great league footy player. They're always going to have moments. Like Liam Duggan had that moment the week before where he dropped the chest mark and it cost us a goal, and he didn't cop it in the way that Rotham has. So, he's still learning. He's only 20 or 25 games into his AFL career. So it's early days for Josh Rotham. Is it the fact that people are they intercept mark fatigued? McGovern does it, Barras does it, Shepherd does it, Hurn does it. All of our defenders go for marks. Do they want to see West Coast players spoiling a bit more? Is that what people get frustrated at, do you think?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe they feel as though he's not providing enough of a point of difference. Some people criticise his disposals, but I think he ran at 100% efficiency. He's made some mistakes with his kicking in the past. I think we've highlighted it. I just didn't think this was the game to smash him, and I think some people did. So there was a disagreement there, that's all. But we welcome all the opinions on the nest from our listeners, and
100%.
I'll vary as the season goes on.
Max King was in rare form. He hasn't done that too many times, but he's threatened to do it for most of his career. This is the thing with Max, is that he's only been able to clunk those marks and get on those runs for short periods of a game. And it happened to coincide with St Kilda probably getting a little bit of control in the midfield. If he's feeling it and playing really well, but the midfield aren't dominating, then he's taking those marks up on the wing because the game's compressed into West Coast half. So as much as if you want to blame Rotham or Edwards or McGovern or whoever, you actually probably have to look further up the grounds. Max King, he was given the opportunity to clunk those marks because of St Kilda getting on top in the midfield.
It was a breakout game for him. It was like Mason Cox in that prelim final. A player that big in that sort of form, you can't really stop it. As Nick Riewoldt said on the couch last night, I think people now will realise, okay, Max King's gone to another level. You need to put a bit more work into him and put players in front of him. I think if the Eagles were playing the Saints this week, they'd say, all right, we need to set up differently for Max King. But you can't blame him this week because he hadn't produced a game like that before. It was his performance out of the box. So you just cop that, wear it, and thankfully we still got the win. Speaking of on the couch, how about these stats that Jared Healy brought forward last night on Nick Natanui? Still underrated. How about this? AFL player ratings, Drew, numero uno. Contested possessions for a ruckman, number one. Clearances for a ruckman, number one. Centre clearances for a ruckman, number one. Hitouts to advantage, number one. Score involvements for a ruckman, number two in the comp. There are people who still want to knock this bloke ridiculously. Just look at that, hang it up in the Louvre, and if you're playing two All-Australian ruckmen, well, he gets the second blazer with Max Gawn.
100%. No, I mean, if we need to campaign every week for it, I'm happy to do it. We can lead the podcast with it. You know, you put last year's performance alongside this year, you know, it's hard to imagine a better season and a half put together by a ruckman in recent memory. The consistency, he hasn't played a bad game for nearly 2 years now. This is a guy who's done a couple of ACLs. I'm always amazed, and you still get the oohs and the ahs at Optus Stadium, and that's the best thing, isn't it, is that we can still marvel at his performance week in, week out. You know, I was showing people his mark on the goal line against St Kilda amongst, 5 or 6 and playing on and kicking that goal. People who don't know footy that well, I'm showing him off in Japan. So hopefully he'll get big in Japan soon. But he's a freak. And as we've talked about before, in terms of those advanced metrics, if you're looking at those stats alone and you trust those stats, then you have to regard him as one of the best players in the competition, because he's been basically, it's been him and Bontempelli as the number 1 and number 2 players in the comp for the entire season. And Bont's going to win the Brownlow, so hopefully Nick Nat gets his blazer.
Exactly right. He was excellent yet again, so integral in those contests, drove us on when we needed it, took a big mark and kicked a big goal as well. That would have silenced a few of the critics once more. Let's talk about the forward line, Drewy, in the game, just to sign off from the Saints win before we move on to other matters. So Jack Darling looked a whole lot better. That was good. I mean, he's been in decent form in recent weeks, had a couple of down games, which we've spoken about, disappointing ones, but he seems to be edging back to his best. He was strong yet again. JK was fantastic. Oscar Allen's a concern, which we can get onto later. We discussed it last week, but I think he's playing banged up. I think maybe it could be time for a rest, just a week off. Give his body time to adjust. Maybe you bring in Bailey Williams and play him second ruck. We saw McGovern go into the ruck for large parts of the game. That was really interesting, which you flagged, Drewy, and I didn't mind it, to be honest. I think he got a bit tired as the game wore on, but he certainly started well. I think Adam Simpson said he was like Polly Farmer in the first quarter, but then he tired a bit, which is fantastic, especially following on from McGovern's comments about his Thailand trip and his fitness this week as we celebrated his 150th. But the forward line seemed to click a whole lot better, apart from, of course, the Liam Ryan injury, which is a bit of a worry, not only because we lose Liam Ryan, which is a huge loss, as we know, but Adam Simpson did say a number of weeks ago when he looked injured against Carlton, when he played that brilliant game and he had that concern late on, he said he needs to be more professional with his conditioning and his recovery. I just wonder if he's letting himself down in that regard a little bit. Drewy?
Did you see the... Sorry, I just banged my watch on the table. Did you see that video that someone posted where West Coast did a socials video of the warm-up and everyone was doing their dynamic karaoke or grapevine or whatever you want to call it, and then Liam Ryan was basically just shuffling along, not even lifting his legs. It's funny, but they are the 1%ers that separate the true professionals from the just the good players.
Yeah.
And we're not. Who knows if he contributed? But if that's his normal warm up, then I'm not surprised that he pings a hammy. To be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the video and look, that's 5 seconds. For all we know, Liam Ryan's done all the work that he needs to do before, and he feels good, and so he's just getting through the final shuttle. But
Simo said it though.
Simo's comments change it. Adam Simpson said it himself that he looked sore around that Carlton game, and he said he just needs to be a bit more professional with his recovery. So, you know, as you play more years in the AFL system, it takes its toll on your body, and you need to become more professional all the time in that regard. When you're in your early 20s, you can just rock up and play every week. And I mean, we all remember when we played sport and we were in our early 20s, we barely even stretched. Like, come on, boys, just get out there and play. We're all right. And you get to your 30s and you need to do 15 minutes of stretching, or else you'll pull a hammy in the first 5 minutes. So he just maybe needs to evolve with that. And yeah, it's disappointing because we feel like we're on the precipice of moving to another level, and we keep losing gun players with these injuries. Shuey out, Ryan out, Barrass out, Redden out. Every team's got injuries, but Shuey and Ryan in particular, and Tommy Barrass, of course, massive losses at this time of the year when we're trying to build a bit of a tilt for the flag.
Yeah, they're impactful players, Garby, you know. But Liam Ryan can win a game for you. Luke Shuey can win a game, literally. You know, a Norm Smith winner. Tom Barrass can be one of the best intercept markers in the AFL on his day. Jack Redden, up to the point where he got injured, had been one of our best players for the season. So, you know, we're not just losing anyone. You know, we're losing players who are integral to us winning games of football. So, yeah, it's frustrating. Just touching on McGovern quickly, liked that Adam Simpson was willing to try something and put McGovern around the ball, just change things up a little bit. And, yeah, someone of that quality to have them making decisions constantly, you know, around where the ball is, just changes things up and gives us a different look. Like, organisationally, perhaps we were a little bit different down back without him there all the time. But Simo said after the game he only spent about 15 to 20 minutes in the ruck. So it's not a huge chunk of time. And then you hand over the responsibility to Shannon Hurn and Brad Shepherd to keep things organised down back. So I don't think, you know, you're not losing too much. And if Barrass comes back and McGovern continues to play that role, then again, you've got another weapon to cover for him while he's not there. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Oscar Allen manage, maybe against Collingwood, who are obviously struggling. Maybe it's a good time.
Yeah, it feels like we just need to freshen him up for a crack at the finals, because whatever injury he's got maybe needs a bit more work, and we don't have the time for it right now. We want him in the team. I just think a week off just to rest, refresh him mentally and physically, and then let him have a crack at it for the final 3 weeks, and then the finals, of course. We'll get to your votes in a moment. I want to touch on the Adam Simpson comments, which, yeah, certainly prompted a lot of discussion, and I think rightfully so at the end of last week, where I think, Drewy, the point he was trying to make was an extremely valid one. I think he just went about it in a really poor way. So what he tried to say was that clubs need resources and can't afford to have the soft cap, the coaching cap, cut as much as it has been forever and a day, because a lot of players that you draft need a lot of work. And it's not just Indigenous players, it's players from all different backgrounds who need time to mature in the system. You're taking them from being teenagers and outside of unique environments and chucking them into a professional AFL environment and expecting them to succeed within 1-2 years. That's hard to do. You need staff around them. You need player development officers, Indigenous liaison officers, et cetera, and they can't afford that as per the restrictions of the AFL at the moment. And he said, well, you're going to have to play it safe then and take kids from private schools and with their parents together and from really settled backgrounds. I think that's where he made a big blunder. I think the point was still valid without going to that extreme. And he's retracted it and he's apologised and they put a statement out. And I'm sure if he had his time again, he would phrase it differently and still be able to make the point that he wanted to.
Yeah, so I just want to point you to a tweet from Corbin Middlemas, who works at the ABC, your colleague.
Yeah.
He says, West Coast still ranked number one at spinning the narrative. And Corbin's a West Coast fan, I believe.
He's actually an Essendon fan. He's not. He's a Bombers fan.
Oh, okay. There you go. I retract that statement. Same club that sacked their Indigenous liaison officer, didn't rehire one, and chose not to use the AFL grant for minority hires, which falls outside the soft cap. So that's his tweet, and he's got attached to it a picture of the article from the West about this issue. I can separate my feelings on this into two areas. So I agree with the sentiment of what he's saying, but I've found the comments to be offensive.
Yeah, no, I think offensive is the right word. They're actually more than just silly or poor. They are offensive.
I went to a public school, and my parents split up when I was 5, and I think I've turned out to be a relatively upstanding part of society, and I wouldn't want to be looked down upon, upon anyone who went to public school or who's come from middle or lower class areas of Australia. So, yeah, I really didn't enjoy those comments.
Yeah, and nor should you. And they're not right, and they're not accurate. And you know what? I actually don't think Adam Simpson believes that, because we all know what Adam Simpson's done and the work he's put into the players from different backgrounds and how much he cares for them and tries to understand their culture. I think his comments come from a point of such high frustration, because he knows how important it is to have the ability to recruit people from unique backgrounds and get them up to AFL standard, and that some people do need work. And it's got nothing to do with your parents or what school you went to. That's just a load of nonsense. But I think he was trying to get that point across and just went about it so badly. And I'm sure he's cringing at his own comments now. And we all make mistakes from time to time. We say things that we just get things wrong. We try to make a point and we make it in a really poor way. And I think that's what he did. But I think it comes from the right place, Drewy.
Yeah, it's almost as if the comments could have been interpreted as tongue-in-cheek, where he was like, well, if this is the way we're going, then we'll only ever take, private school boys, blah, blah, blah. But maybe I don't know if he missed the mark with his tone or what it was, but because I have found it frustrating that the way that the AFL NAB League and the opportunity for country school kids to play as much football as the private school boys in Victoria has lessened. So at the moment, the system, it doesn't weigh in your favour if you're not a private school educated AFL hopeful. So that's not necessarily the case in WA, but where most of the AFL players come from, which is Victoria, the system is against you if you're not in one of those elite programs. And I just find that it really pisses me off.
Yeah, and so it should.
To think that not everyone gets an equal opportunity because of the family that they're born into. And look, if you're good enough, you'll end up in the AFL. I have a lot of faith that, the people who are looking for the talented youngsters, they understand the system. They know that not everyone gets the same opportunity to shine. But, I'm trying to find the right word here. It's not equal across the competition for everyone. And so comments like that, while Simo was trying to do the right thing, it ended up coming out a bit wrong.
Yeah, I think clubs are very good at recruiting players from different backgrounds and putting work into them. And I think that's his point. We are actually very good at it now. But if we don't keep the resources maintained in clubs, then we will go back to what it was like in the 80s or 90s or whatnot, when you didn't have the recruiting capabilities to look outside your square and your zone and things like that, right? I think that's what he's trying to say. We'll fall back 10, 20 years unless we invest in those areas. He just said it in an offensive way. He really did. So, we have to touch on it. But we love what he's done with players of different backgrounds before. He's been fantastic in that regard, and I'm sure he will be moving forward.
Just jump in, just one more. Someone on Twitter actually posted a photo of Simo. I reckon he was with Liam Ryan and Willie Rioli, and that sort of made me feel a little bit better seeing that photo of them together. We know that Simo's spent time in the Tiwi Islands, West Coast. They've put effort into that area, and Simo himself personally has made effort.
Oh, yeah.
So we should praise him for that. And just outside of West Coast, I believe Richmond had 8 of their 22 who were Indigenous against Collingwood on the weekend, which is really great. Like, to think, Garby, that I think, is it about 4 or 5% of the Australian population is Indigenous, but to see almost, or over 33% of an AFL team made up of Indigenous Australians, like, it's an amazing representation that we have in our game. And anything that we can do to nurture that, to help them become great citizens and to help, then give back to their communities is a massive positive. And
the Eagles have an unbelievable record when it comes to drafting, developing, promoting our Indigenous players and our Indigenous cause. We got a wonderful record, and we do since the late 80s, early 90s. We're fantastic 100%. In that regard.
Yeah, we've been great with it.
We certainly have. So it was just odd. They were odd comments, but hey, we all make errors from time to time, and we certainly won't judge Simo by that. But, if he had his time again, he would, I'm sure, no doubt. And thankfully, he's retracted the comments and apologised for them. Let's move on. Shannon Hurn's 300th this week. We did speak about him in depth when he broke the Eagles games record. But he's been in front of the media this week, which he's hated once more, which has been hilarious. He just says, I know I've got to do all this stuff, but put it this way, next week will be better than this week, even though this week's his 300th, because he just can't stand all the attention. But he's an icon. He's in wonderful form. And to reach 300 games, first Eagle to do so, how good.
Yeah, amazing effort. I guess it's long been spoken about how it's the air travel just takes its toll. He's played, I think he's played about 160 home games and he'll be 140 odd away games. It's a lot of trips to the airport, isn't it? It's a lot of miles back and forth. But he's been a sensational player, so durable, so reliable. They're the ones that tend to get to 300, Garby, is the ones that the coach can put on the team sheet first and know that they're going to get the job done. So, and you can say that for Shannon Hurn from basically the day that he walked in. I loved the comments, how he said, after he got drafted, he thought to himself, I'll probably end up back in South Australia. And then having been at West Coast for a few months, he said, this is not the club that you leave.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point I wanted to bring up, in the angle on Shagger, Bunga Hurn this week. We've got a really good record at keeping interstate players. The toughest players to keep, they say, are Vic Metro, because they come from a bigger city and they dream of playing at the MCG and walking down Chapel Street being superstars. So, it was a battle to keep Chris Judd, but we kept him for 6 years. Great effort. We've kept Andrew Gaff. But Vic Metro players for the interstate clubs can be tough to keep at times. Vic Country's a bit different because they're going to a bigger city anyway, and they don't really have a desire to live in a massive city like Melbourne. So they're really happy in Perth. And South Australian players are a bit in between. But our record with them is great. Bowie Waters, Sammy Butler, Shannon Hurn, and our Vic Country players, Callum Chambers, Michael Braun, they all still stay in WA. They love it. They become Perth boys through and through. And Shannon's another one. And it's just great to see that they've never had a desire to go back, and that the club has just kept them on board and made them feel so welcome that they just seem like bona fide West Australian. Shannon Hurn probably goes back to the farm in South Australia, but he's an Eagles man through and through, and he never once hankered for a move away, as he alluded to in his press conference.
Yeah, he's been so loyal. We've been privileged to have him as a player for 299 games, and hopefully he signs up a new contract because he's playing great footy. So let's hope that he's here for at least another season and get up to 322 odd.
Let's go to the votes from the Saints game. So you've abstained from the votes this week, Drew, because you didn't catch the match in full. I like that stance. Maybe that's a bit of a lesson for people. If you haven't seen the game in detail, don't vote. But we welcome all the votes anyway, so we don't really care. It's great. And there were so many that came through this week. We appreciate them, but I acknowledge the stance that you stood by anyway. I went 5 for Tim Kelly. I just think when the game was there to be won, he stood up more than any other. If it wasn't for going off for 15 minutes or so with that little injury concern, then, he just blitzes the rest of the field in that sense. But I think he still deserved the 5 for me. Dom Sheed got my 4 votes. Dom delivers when it matters most. Those 2 goals late on seal the game for us. Elliot Yeo, the 3 for his constant work around the contest all game. Great to have the midfielders up there. I gave 2 to Josh Rotham for his defensive effort, mainly in the first half, which I think was critical. And then 1 to Nick Natanui, who was fantastic in the ruck all game. These are the Ness Medal votes from our listeners. Drew, 61 to Dom Sheed. Tim Kelly, 60 votes. So Dom Sheed knocked him off by a vote. So she gets the 5, TK the 4, 61 to 60. Elliot Yeo gets the 3 on 41 votes. Nick Natanui the 2 with 33 votes. And Josh Kennedy actually snuck in for the 1 vote with 11. He beat Josh Rotham, who finished on 7. So Rotham finished 6th. For those who are interested to know where Roth figured in the voting, JK got the 1. So, Drewy, the Ness Medal leaderboard. Nick Natanui now out at 42 votes. So he's got a big lead. Tim Kelly on 29. They've broken away. Jack Darling, 23. Tom Barras, 21. Dom Sheed jumps up to 21. So we've got a group of 5 that have broken away. Nick Nat Kelly, Darling, Barras, Sheed, 21. Gaff, 15. Redden, 14. Allen, 13. Hurn up to 12. Elliot Yeo up to 11. Geez, he's making a big run. And then we've got the rest. But nice to see Joshy Kennedy getting a vote this week as well. But Nick Nat continues to continue on, and no surprise that he's up there in the coaches' votes as well. He's actually jumped ahead of Max Gawn in the coaches' votes too, Drewy.
Oh, I'm ready to anoint him everything. all Australian, Ness Medal, AFL MVP. I reckon he'd be a great choice for MVP. Bontempelli will win it, but Nick is just integral to how we play, and he plays well, especially when we win, but he carries the flag for us when we're down as well. So he's having a great season. What are you thinking for changes this week, Garby? I mean, we saw Jake Waterman come in. I like that he was rewarded for a really great performance in the Waffle, and then was a really nice link man for us. Like, at his best, Jake Waterman could be like the new Tom Lynch, Adelaide Tom Lynch, the connector. That's like, the best version of Jake Waterman would be creating that link for us between our gun key pillars and our midfield. And it felt like he did that on the weekend. So glad to see that he's back in the team. Just a question now of how you juggle the rest. So Barras probably still maybe another week away, so that gives Harry Edwards another chance to be in the team. The other one is Mark Hutchings. Do you feel like he contributed enough? Does he need a couple of games in the team to sort of get settled?
Yeah, it was great to see Hutch back. I mean, let's not lose sight of how long he's been out of the team and how important he was to us for a long period of time, especially in our premiership year. So that was maybe understated in this podcast and maybe around the game on the weekend as well.
Well, we've got Steel Sidebottom this week, which is the Hutch's normal go-to, and he doesn't normally miss with Steel. Did a good job on the grand final, did a good job on him in the qualifying final against Collingwood. And I reckon even at the game at the MCG during the year when we beat them, he did the job. So maybe Hutch to Rusty for old time's sake.
Yeah, I like that. Sidebottom, according to Pies fans, is not travelling as well as he should. So that seems like a good matchup for Hutch at the moment. He's still working his way back, but looked pretty sharp. Yeah, I think he stays in the team. I think there's only one change, to be honest, because, as you said, Barras not ready to come back. Redden's still a week away, we understand. Shuey's still a week away, at least, we understand. So Ryan goes out. I think it's just Petrocelli if he's fit for Liam Ryan, and that's probably it, Drewy. I'm not sure there's another change there. And then maybe Oscar Allen if they manage him, and Bailey Williams comes in as the second ruck, and you go the old double team on Grundy with Nick Nat and Bailey, a la Vardy and Lysette on Grundy, which, of course, helped us win the grand final in 2018. Or Vardy instead of Bailey Williams, for old time's sake. Apparently Vardy had a really big game in the Waffle on the weekend.
Yeah, well, let's just bring back all the 2018 Premiership stars. Is Mark Lacroix available? Let's get the band back together.
Who else are we missing from that team? There aren't too many.
No, there's not too many. It's interesting, isn't it? Does it put anything in perspective for you as to where we're at when you look at Collingwood right now? So Nathan Buckley's no longer at the helm. They've had to trade away a bunch of their players. They've mismanaged the salary cap. David King also pointed this out. They've also traded away their first-round draft pick this year. So they tried to get smart because Nick Dacos was always going to be their first pick because he'd get bid on early. but they probably thought they were going to finish, somewhere between 6th and 10th, which means they wouldn't be trading away necessarily a high pick. There's a chance they could finish last. They would have got day costs regardless, and they missed out on pick number 1. It's an amazing situation. They've fallen so far in a short amount of time. Collingwood are going to be down the bottom for a while, and West Coast are at least we're still in the fight. We've maintained our position.
Yeah, we should win on the weekend. Yeah, Chris Marston and Lysette are the other two that come to mind. Maybe they can come back for one more game just to rekindle some old memories. We should be too good. I'm happy the game's at the MCG. We needed to be at the MCG. We actually feel okay there at the moment. We beat Hawthorn there earlier on in the season. This should be a 4-pointer. I think the Pies are playing some decent footy at the moment, but they're a very young team, and you wouldn't bank on them sticking with it for 4 quarters at the moment. Pendlebury's obviously a massive out as well. Chris Mayne comes back. He's a decent player. They might get Jeremy Howe back, but he's missed a lot of footy, so you aren't too worried about that. I mean, really, we should be able to handle them and win this game of football and keep on tracking in the right direction. So I don't see too many issues for us, and I don't see too many changes of note that Adam Simpson has to worry about. I think things look pretty settled, and especially in the midfield, Drewy. Of course, we're missing Luke Shuey enormously and Jack Redden, but in Yeo, Sheed, Kelly, Gaff, who's in some decent form, and Connor West, who's making a difference, we've got a pretty solid on-ball brigade at the moment, and that's obviously such an important part of the game. And the forward line's moving in the right direction with JK back in some form. You'd imagine Josh Kennedy would play this one. Zachy Langdon's contributing in a nice way. And, if we do get Petruccelli back, well, we know that at his best, he can make up for the Ryan absence in some ways with the pace and the goal smarts. Obviously not in the air and with some of the brilliant acts, but he just needs to be more consistent with the amount of ball he gets. And Jake Waterman just needs to be more consistent all up. I mean, it was a good point to bring him up. He had a really good game, but we know that he has good games in those environments. Warm day, Optus, game in our terms. I want to see Jake Waterman have a big game when it's going against us. And that's been my knock on him so far. There's too big of a gap between his best and his worst.
Yeah, it'd be nice to come out of a game against a really big team and say, oh, gee, Jake Waterman delivered for us today, or he stood up for us when the chips were down. That hasn't been the case so far during his career. So just looking at the ladder, so Essendon plays Sydney. Now, the Swans are obviously 2 games and percentage ahead of us. It's going to be really hard for us to catch the Swans. They're one of the form teams of the competition right now, but they're still sort of stuck in 6th spot. But they're knocking on the door of the top 4. If we win this week, and let's say the Swans beat Essendon, GWS are playing Port Adelaide. If both the Dons and the Giants lose, we'll basically have a 3-game buffer in 7th spot. So, that almost locks us into the top 8, which is great. I guess the question is, do we want to play Sydney away in a final? What we really want is Port Adelaide to drop. The game that I want Port Adelaide away.
Yeah.
That's our best game, I reckon. Brisbane away, Swans away. I know we're projecting a little bit here, but the reality is we'll probably finish 7th. So just looking at who I'd like to get. The other one is Melbourne. If Melbourne just fall off a cliff and just slide right down, I'd happily play Melbourne at the MCG.
They're big calls. I still like Port because I think they'll be better for the experience of getting to a semi-final last year and a preliminary final last year, and the 3 players they've been missing most of the season, Butters, Dersma, Rosie, I think are so important to them, and they're all coming back and starting to get into some form. I can see Port getting into some decent nick when the finals come around. I'm a little bit worried by them as much as we enjoy playing at the Adelaide Oval. Brisbane's a team I wouldn't mind because their injuries are starting to pile up, but then they're also an excellent side. I still think, as good as they've been, that Sydney's our best matchup in the first week. I still think it is. I just feel as though if we can get up to our best, we can match them around the ball and we can hold their forward line, which can be hot and cold. And I think we can knock them off in a big game, but they're in really good touch at the moment. I just think come finals, they haven't got as much experience as a unit as some of the other teams like Port and Brisbane do. Melbourne's a decent call, but at their best, can we match it with them? Yeah, maybe. I'd probably go Sydney 1, Melbourne 2 if I had to pick right now for our first matchup in the finals. It wouldn't be Port or Brisbane for me. I'd be Sydney 1, Melbourne 2. What would your top two be?
Oh, yeah, tough one. And top two would be Essendon, Richmond, Freo.
All the teams above.
Yeah, I mean, they're all tough. It's really even this year, isn't it? The top six is really good. We feel like we're sort of half a step off that top six. At our best, we're in the mix, though. So long as we don't play Swans at GMHBA Stadium, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Well, if we play them there, then we won't rock up.
Well, exactly. That's interesting. And I reckon they would lobby for it there, to be honest.
It's like, unfortunately, it's on the table.
Yeah.
If they can't play their home game at the SCG, the thought of having to make that decision again makes me feel sick. I don't want to have to decide whether I'm going to Geelong or not.
I don't think we can jump over Sydney. They've got Gold Coast to come. They've got North to come. They'll win both of those games. They've got some tricky ones against Essendon and St Kilda, but they just need to win 2 of their last 4, and they are pretty much locked in the top 6, you would think. We have to win all of our games to jump over them. Our percentage isn't great. So, yeah, it's looking like it's 7th for us if things track as they are right now. And then, hopefully we can beat them in a final, but maybe a Brisbane drops down, or a Melbourne or Port drop down, although I think that's asking a bit much. So a lot to watch out for, Drew. Let's just worry about our own backyard, though. If we get up to our best form, we can knock off anyone in our day. We know that. But there's going to be some really tough matchups in the finals. That's for sure. Let's just beat the Pies this week. That'll be good. Feast out on the memories of Collingwood at the MCG for the next few days, people. Put on the 2018 grand final yet again and enjoy watching us roll out at the MCG and hopefully nabbing another 4 points against the Pies.
Garby, great to chat from Tokyo. Stay safe in lockdown, and more gold for Australia.
Good stuff, mate. You too. Enjoy the rest of the Olympics.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.